Hello and welcome to the Nature Journal Club. My name is John Muir Laws. This is part 2 of a video series to help you be able to draw and sketch fish. In this workshop we'll look at how to foreshorten the body and also take a look at the ways that fish actually move, what part of the body moves as they are shaking their little fish tails. That will help you draw what you see. We are also going to take a look at two major concepts that you can apply broadly across all of the art and drawing that you do. These are the use of parallel guides and also looking for the planes that make up the body of what you draw. First, a little review and one correction. In this video we'll be referring to fins by names, and each of the fins has a different name. If you've already seen the video on how to draw fish, part 1, pause the video now and just review, see if you can name those fins that you see all over the body. Give you a chance to do that right now, and I'm assuming you just did that. So just a quick review. That one on the top, that's the dorsal fin. The one at the back is, yes, the tail, also called the caudal fin. You'll see one fin sticking out right behind the gill plate there. That is the pectoral fin, so you can think of that being up by the pectoral muscles, and below that is the pelvic fin, associated with the fish's pelvis. There's one more fin at the back on the bottom between the pelvic fin and the tail. That's referred to as the anal fin. A correction, if you've seen the previous video, I referred to the anal fin also being called a ventral fin. That was a mistake. The term ventral fin is used for the pelvic fin. That's the one below the pectoral fin. So as you trace your finger along the underside of the body, that's the first one you get to on the bottom of the body there before you get back to that anal fin. We're going to start by taking our fish and rocking it at all sorts of three-dimensional angles, particularly looking at a three-quarter view of the fish. Here's our theoretical model. Imagine that oval at the top, that is your very simplified fish. And this fish has lines going around its body at 3 spots. Those could be perhaps the location of where the gill plate is, where the dorsal fin starts, or another fin on the bottom. But what we want to notice is as this hot dog fish rotates towards you, those lines get increasingly curved and also increasingly close together. At the same time, the overall dimensions of this hot dog are becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. So when you're looking down the hot dog, on the very bottom there, looking end on the hot dog, it's just a little circle. When you're looking at it in full side view on the top, you see the full length of the hot dog. And in between those two positions, you have gradations of those positions. This little simplified model is very, very useful in drawing fish at a three-quarter view angle. I find it's really hard to get my brain to see a long fish and give myself permission to kind of block that in using an oval with smaller proportions. My brain is going to fight against that. So knowing that that's going to happen in advance is really going to help you do what you do. Here's an example of that. Here is a fish swimming along underwater. Look at the length of this fish. Look at the width of the fish. Here is a simplified version of that fish body. We rotate that fish, and its body is now a shorter hot dog. It is really, again, very hard to get your brain to give yourself permission to do this. Another thing to notice here is take a look at the distance between the fins. As we come in here, those pectoral fins and the pelvic fins, those are the first two on the bottom. That's the pectoral fin right behind the gill plate. Notice that those have become closer together. And look at as we rotate it even more, that distance has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter. But how hard would it be for your brain to draw a fish that is this long and give yourself permission to have that be the preliminary shape that you're using to block this fish in? As you're looking at the fish from different angles, There are a few lines that I find very, very helpful to help keep that fish aligned. The first is just a central line down the axis of the body. As that fish rotates, I'm still going to try to find where that line is on the body of my fish. Now, to help me get the mouth parallel with the eyes, parallel with other features on this fish, I'm going to put in a set of parallel guides. And you'll see in the next few slides, I'm going to be using these again and again and again. This is a really big deal drawing trick. I first was exposed to this by bird artist Keith Hansen, who uses this to help get the wings and tail and other body parts of birds that he's sketching aligned when he's drawing them at interesting angles. It's fairly obvious here when you see this fish straight on. However, if you're looking at a fish from an angle, here's roughly where its center line is. I couldn't figure out how to make this line curve using Keynote, but imagine that line kind of curving up the center of the face. Here are the parallel guides going across that. Notice that the eyes are parallel with the top of the mouth. Right? The mouth, as it goes down to the corner, that's going to go at a different angle. But right as that really difficult area is right as you come across the top of the face. Getting those parts of the mouth parallel, getting those parallel with the eyes is really going to help your fish face. Let's try another fish here. Before I put any lines on the screen, pause this video for a moment and just hold a pencil up to the screen. Put it along the top of the eyes, that little nostril, and notice that all those parallel features. Here's our center line. Here are parallel guides. So on my little fish buddy right here, you can see very lightly in the background a hint of those parallel guides. I'm going to take you through a step-by-step and show you how I went about sketching this fish. So it started with just an oval. Again, it's going to be difficult to give yourself permission to draw a fish with a longer body from a foreshortened position. That whole thing is going to become this oval shape. I have a little hint of a tail sticking out the back, and then my center line curving down the front of my fish face. The next piece on that are going to be the parallel guides. The eyes and the mouth, I want to get those elements to be parallel with each other. Another thing I want to start to think about are the planes on the surface of this fish. By planes, I mean if you were to carve this fish out of ice using or wood, using the fewest strokes that you could, you'd get this kind of choppy, blocky fish. But there are certain surfaces that you could actually represent fairly well with a flat plane. One of those here is on the front of the face of this fish. That's going to be a difficult area for me to wrap these lines around. So it's going to help me initially really to think of that as a plane. I'm also going to think of the mouth of this fish, the top edge of the lip, the bottom edge of the lip in the front, not where they go tilting back into those kind of downward fish mouth corners. But the front of the fish lips, I want to think of that as also a plane. Here I'm just putting in a little box to help me do that. Here is a, excuse me, I should have put a glass of water next to me. Here are the positions of my fins, blocking those in. And that is the framework that I'm using to help draw in this fish. Now let's just go back to this. Take a look at those parallel guides and notice how those relate to keeping those eyes parallel. Look at that box in the front of the mouth and see how I am using that to help visualize getting that front part of the mouth before the tilt of the big fish lips to be parallel. I also want you to take a close look at the eye on the other side of the fish, the far eye. Always silence your phone before you start making a video. Take a look at that eye on the far side. That is a shape you're going to see again and again and again as you are drawing fish. And what you want to do is to just get comfortable blocking that in. It's that sort of tube of an eye sticking out, with often you'll see a little bit of the curve of the lens on the far side. If you have access to, well, you obviously have access to stuff online, go just take a look at a bunch of different fish and make sketches of about 10 or so eye on the other sides. You'll make yourself comfortable with being able to sketch what you see there, and that will really, really help your fish as you're drawing them. Again, that little kind of buggy eye sticking out on the other side, just get yourself comfortable with that, and you'll find that fish from angles are going to become a lot less scary to draw. Let's take a look at how I did this one. The parallel guides in this, take a look at how you can see how I'm going to be using those. Notice that I'm going to be using those to align the eyes and also those fins, the pectoral and pelvic fins on the underside of the fish. Let's take a look at what went on there. So starting with the general posture of this fish, the angle of its body, over that I drew a light kind of guideline to block in the mass of that fish's body. End of the tail. And here we get to the parallel guides, my first set of parallel guides. The front of the mouth, the eyes, the back of the head. I want to think all of these as sort of sets of parallel features. This fish has a big kind of duck bill. And to help me draw that, I find it's useful to think of part of this face in kind of cubist, geometric, simplified form. So here I'm drawing in just a placeholder for the shape of that face, but rather than thinking of that as a curved shape, initially it's going to help me block in that front of the face, keeping those angles very simple. Then when I'm drawing a curved shape inside of that, I'll have guidelines to help me keep my face aligned. Here is the end of my fish's tail. In drawing this, it really helps to look at the negative space. What is the shape of the water above and below that tail in that little space there? You'll see if you just focus on drawing the fish, it's actually more difficult for your brain to catch nuances of shape back there than if you actually look at the shape of the water next to that fish. Here's a few placeholders for fins. And now I'm going to turn my attention to the fins in the front. Initially, I'm going to put in a couple of little dots where the pectoral and pelvic fins are going to emerge. I'm just putting a dot thinking about spacing, how far down along the bottom edge of that fish. I'm going to draw in the fins that are on the closest edge. Now, the fish can take those pelvic and pectoral fins and turn them in any which way they want. But often if they're just neutrally floating in the water, those fins are going to be parallel with each other. If I want to get those fins parallel and have them also be parallel with the features of the head, what do I use? That's right, our parallel guides. So first, I'm going to put in some spacers, keeping parallel with those parallel guides. On the underside of my fish, my fins don't come out from the same point under the fish. There's a little bit of space on the underside of the fish between the pectoral and pelvic fin. I mean, not the pectoral, between the front pelvic fin on the left and the pelvic fin on the right, and the pectoral fin on the left and the pectoral fin on the right. So there's going to be space between those, and so I'm drawing in some spacer bars there at the same angle as my parallel guides. Now I'm going to draw in parallel guides going from the bottom of those fins, so that as I start to draw in the fin on the other side, I know where to stop my line. And then my fins are foreshortened. They are at the same angles, and all those features are parallel from the face to the fins. And there's my fish. I know this is a big step. It's kind of like that how to draw an owl meme that goes around on the web. getting from here to here. Yes, it's a big step, but here I'm actually not as interested in the details of how I'm making these red lines here. The critical thing is getting these lines right so that as I start to draw my lines, these more intentional lines, they're going in the right places on top of a framework that geometrically has already solved a bunch of the drawing problems for this fish. Another thing that's going to help you in drawing your fish is to start to visualize them three-dimensionally. If I'm going to be sculpting this fish, if I'm going to be drawing the water, reflections of the water across the back of this fish, if I am going to be drawing patterns that are going around this fish, thinking of it three-dimensionally is really going to help. One way you can do this is a set of discs, visualizing foreshortened discs down the bottom of the fish. Those are then going to curve as you get to the top and the bottom of the fish. Another way of visualizing this fish is to simplify it in your head into kind of more of, again, this is the cubist fish. Simplify it into a few basic planes. You can see how this would be really helpful if you're drawing in the shadows. I find that visualizing planes on what I'm drawing, I've been spending a little bit more, paying more attention to that recently. It's really helping my drawing. I'm finding that I'm doing this in all sorts of different subjects, from birds to trees to landscapes to rocks to fish. Even in something that has, of course, rounded edges like a fish, if I can get myself to visualize where those sort of major plane breaks would be, it's really going to help me in modeling this fish and thinking about it. So start to look for those on everything that you're seeing around you. Now let's take a look at how fish actually move. I used to think that fish, they've got this sort of snake-like body and they wiggle like a snake, kind of like a garden hose. I've actually seen illustrations where it sort of start with this sort of sinuous S-curve and then you build the whole fish over that, and I've done that in some of my previous drawings. But taking a closer look at how fish move and their anatomy reveals something very interesting. Take a look at this. This is a fish skeleton. Can you pick out the different fins that you've identified? There's that beautiful fin on the top, that's your dorsal fin. You can see that the front rays of it are stiff, there are softer rays behind. There's your caudal fin at the back. On the front edge you've got that pectoral fin, and down below it the pelvic fin. You can see the anal fin sticking out at the back. Again, starting heavy spines, then going lighter. Now let's take a look at the area below the spine. Here's where things are really going to get interesting. Notice what's happening with the ribs. In front of the start of the anal fin, those ribs between the gill plate and where the anal fin starts, those are paired ribs. It's double, 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 double. Once you get from the anal fin back, those are single ribs coming down. Why is that? That front space where the double is, that's the body cavity of the fish that has all the guts, the intestines, the reproductive organs, the heart, the liver, all those little fish bits. If you're cleaning a fish, that's the cavity that you're cleaning out. And that part behind it is all muscle. So the front part of the fish contains all of these organs. And that part of the fish is going to be less mobile, less wiggly than the part behind it, which is all muscle for wiggling back and forth. You can get some movement in the front, but the bulk of the movement is going to be behind that. Take a look at the same thing going on in this fish. Aren't fish skeletons absolutely stunning? All right. See if you can pick out the different fins in this photograph, and then notice there's that area up front between the pectoral fin and where the anal fin starts. On the bottom edge, that's between the pelvic fin and the anal fin. That space right in there, that's where all your guts are going to be. That's a less wiggly part of the fish. So what does this mean? It means as the fish tail is flipping, take a look at those photographs on the left-hand side. Notice that the front part of the fish doesn't move as much. There's more movement in the back of the fish. there's more movement in the back of the fish. So it's not wiggling like a hose. The front part is more straight. The back part does most of the wiggle. And on different species of fish, the amount of wigglage, that wiggle point, is going to be at different points. So trout actually, that's the second. So let's take a look at the series of drawings on the right-hand side. The blue part represents the more wiggly part of the fish. On something like an eel, there's a lot of wiggle going on there. On a trout below that, that's about half and half. So that's a fair amount of wiggle. But notice that that front part, that's going to be solid. As you get to other fish, you notice that the wiggle part gets further and further and further back. So don't assume that you know how a particular fish is going to wiggle. Look at that fish wiggling in a tank. Look for photographs. Look for reference material. Where possible, get a real thing. The next time you catch a fish, hold it by the head and wiggle that tail gently, and then let it go back into the water. And you'll sort of see what is the wiggle part of the fish. Really, really interesting to see. So we're going to have part of our fish be straighter, and then that curve start further back on our fish. So on this little shark here, notice that there is the front part is being more straight. The back part is where my curve is going to happen. Let's kind of walk through how I went about this step by step, starting with a line straight to a curve. And then I'm going to put the body of my shark around that. So here is the body of the shark going up above that. Notice that that line that is on the underside of the body, that goes down the middle of the underside of the body, I'm not resting my body oval up against that. There's actually, the body wall is lower than my central line because I'm looking at it from the underside. If I were drawing this shark from the top, I would start with one smooth curved line that would be the dorsal line down the top of my shark. If I'm thinking about drawing the shark from below, I'm drawing a line. My first little curved line is going to be an imaginary line, sort of the zipper line, going down the middle of my shark. At that part of the back where the shark starts to spin around and curve around, there are going to be some confusing angles there. Notice how sort of simply I've blocked this in. I'm not really stressing out right now about how that change is going to happen. I'm just going like, and then it gets thinner. So here is my shark. Notice that it's fairly flat across the bottom. On this one, you can see that there's a tail sticking out the side. You can see that point where the body is starting to turn. Isn't that cool? So if there is a fairly flat part across the bottom, I'm going to represent that in here with another line to sort of box in the bottom of my fish. So I have my center line of my fish. I have two edges of my fish. So this is putting in the line that is the other side of the underside of my fish. So the closer edge on the underside of my fish. And now I'm going to put a set of parallel guides across that. Snout, mouth, and where my fins are going to come out. There's fin number 1. I can see where fin number 2 is going to start, but where is it going to end? It's going to end somewhere along this line. Ooh, parallel guides. So somewhere along this parallel guide, this fin is going to come down. Depending on how much this fish is rocked, so that you're looking at the underside versus a profile view of it, those fins will be further or closer together along that line. We've got a dorsal fin on our buddy, and the fins that are starting to kind of come around the corner here, this is on part of the body that is twisting, so these are not going to be parallel with all the rest of my parallel guides. There's the end of my tail, and with this, I have my fish essentially blocked in. Again, big jump to here. But it's the keeping those sort of the function of those parallel guides that's our real take home for today. Also, let's take a look again at how I'm thinking about this in terms sort of cubist terms here. What are the angles and planes on this fish? Notice how I've kind of blocked in some basic angles on this on the underside of this on the side of this shark to help me think about this three-dimensionally. Another example of the same. Now we're going to take a look at how water and light actually look when we see them. We have our shark swimming around here with these planes on it. Light is going to be filtering through the water, dancing across this animal's body. What is really going to happen when we see that? So here we go. If you were underneath water that was completely still, light would diffuse down evenly or penetrate down evenly in a sheet through the water. But the minute you have some waves and ripples on the top of the water, those are focusing and spreading the light that has come down. So some areas will get less light, some areas will get more light, because that curved surface starts to bend the light that comes through the water. The result here is beams of light coming down, and when those beams of light come down and hit another object, they make really interesting patterns. So instead of the light being an even coat across the bottom of a swimming pool, you get these interesting patterns of focused light in areas where the light has been focused away from. Depending on how wavy the top surface is, the more chaotic these patterns become. So these dancing light patterns are going to be, these are called caustic projections. These caustic projections are going to be projected onto the back of any object that is swimming or floating close to the surface. As you get deeper down into the water, you're not going to see these. But things that are close to the top, perhaps a dolphin, perhaps a whale, a shark, you're going to see these sorts of caustic projections across the top of the body. These you don't see as you start to get deeper down into the water. Any divers out there watching this video, I would love to learn the depth at which you no longer see caustic projections. Clear water, anybody can get some data on this. I'd be absolutely fascinated with it. So here's our shark swimming along, and you've got caustic projections on the back of it. Notice that they are only on the back of the shark, not the belly, because that's the surface that is getting that direct sunlight. On this shark, you can see another interesting pattern. In order to help a shark hide in open water, many open water fish will have this very interesting pattern called countershading, where the belly is lighter, the back is darker. That way, the dark back in the sunlight and the light belly in the shade counteract each other and more or less neutralizing the three-dimensional form that you would see because of the shadow and that highlight of whoever is swimming there in open water. This one, because it's so close to the top, those caustic projections, and the sunlight is really bright on its back, but you get the shark a little bit deeper in the water, and that dark top with light on it and that light belly in shade cancel each other out, and these are able to hide in open water. Often divers who go down in those and watch in these shark tanks, and they'll watch for great white sharks, and then people will have these shark experiences. Something that people often talk about is that they're so startled by the way that this huge animal suddenly was next to them. They didn't see it coming, and all of a sudden it emerged, this shape emerged out of the gloom. How can it hide in open water? It can do that because of this countershading pattern. So that's a cool pattern to look for on fish And sharks, when you're drawing them where they're deeper in the water, remember you're not going to see as much contrast down there. So kind of go easy on the contrast. Closer you get to the surface, perhaps you're going to see those patterns a little bit better. Speaking of light penetrating water, let's take a look at that. You already know that bottom of the ocean, it's completely dark down there. So as you go from the surface into the twilight zone, into the abyssal zones of the ocean, you get deeper, 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 no light down there. And what's interesting is that different wavelengths of light penetrate to different depths into the water. And you're going to say, like, how does this kind of fun physics feat, how does this affect my drawing? Just hang on for a second, because this is really, really cool, and it'll help you draw more accurate underwater scenes. So some wavelengths scatter. The lower energy wavelengths of light scatter more easily in the water. So that means the reds, the oranges, are going to drop out first. So that if you were 10 meters, if you were 5 meters down and you saw a rainbow fish in front of you, you'd see all the colors of that rainbow. You get that same fish, say a fish that is half red, half yellow. If you take that down to 20 meters, it is going to look gray and yellow. You get that same fish down to about 40 meters, the whole fish is going to look gray. So depending on how deep you go, different colors are going to drop out preferentially. And so some of the blues are the ones that you'll see have the most penetration into the water. So when you're looking at fish at different depths, things that are in very shallow water in tropical area, think of your tropical fish, these are bright colors. They're displaying to each other with all of these colors. Things in the middle of the down in open ocean, they're going to have this countershading effect. Notice that these little fish with these countershading programs in the top third of this illustration, those fish out there, they really stand out. That's because this illustration does not account for the effect of shadows, so the shadows are ignored in this illustration. You get down deeper than that, if you want to hide, be red. Be red. There's no red. The red light is one of the first things to go. You want to be bright red and invisible. That's great if you're in these low light conditions. So you'll find a lot of deeper things being red to actually help them hide. Which leads us to just a few common and simple problems that people make in their fish illustrations. And the first kind of is that, let's take a look at this fish here. This one, here's a deep water fish, and this fish, poof, you've got a picture of it with your flash photography. So a couple of things here. First is, if you're trying to draw this fish in the environment where it lives, and you draw it with all these bright, beautiful colors, you're drawing this fish how it appears with flash photography, right? Not how it looks in the real gloom of that water. So be aware that these red colors would drop out. If you are trying to draw this fish and you just want to show the colors, that's fine, but be aware that if you're trying to make a scene that is looking like things look down at that depth, these reds are not going to be really in your face like that. Another problem here is that we're up here really close with this fish, and as a result, there is this extreme foreshortening effect that we get. If your camera lens gets close to a fish or anything, you're going to have this extreme foreshortening effect. So if you were just to take this photograph and copy it line for line, you would have a drawing of a fish with really exaggerated foreshortening effects, which is what you would be seeing if you were a tiny little fish or a little piece of krill that that came up to this, that got a little bit too close to this big fish. Here's another problem that you can get into if you are drawing these fish from photographic reference. So here's a photograph of the fish. I can get all these cool details off of this photograph. It's a deep water fish. Notice the red color. But this fish has been, it's got these, its fins are straight out. Its eyes are bugging out of its head. And on top of that, there's this strange thing poking out of its mouth. This is a fish with an extreme case of Barada trauma. This is pressure trauma. This fish was caught in a net and pulled to the surface very, very quickly. The gas inside its swim bladder has expanded, pushing the eyes out in its head, causing that fin to go fully erect. Even the swim bladder, you can see it sticking out the front of that fish's mouth. That's not its tongue, that's its swim bladder poking out through its mouth. So this fish with extreme pressure trauma, if you use this as your reference for your fish underwater, you are not drawing a happy fish. Case in point. If you see this photograph, it would be really easy to think, oh, dynamite reference material. Yes, for scales, and we can see all these fins and things, but this full bug out, open mouth, fin extended thing, you're just seeing the signs here of Barada trauma. This is not a happy fish, so you wouldn't want to draw this next to your kelp kind of with this expression on. We're down under the water. We're a much happier fish. Eyes back into the head. The fins can retract. This guy's doing much better. Here again is that in-your-face Spider-Man Marvel Comics foreshortening effect. Again, you see this kind of foreshortening when your point of view is right up next to the fish. So if this fish is inches away from you, boom, you're going to get something like this. But as the fish is actually sort of swimming at normal observation distances, you're not going to see that. All right, here are a couple of fish illustrations, and these also show another kind of common mistake. If you are maybe making a field guide or something, and you're trying to draw the fish, you've caught the fish, you pulled it out of the water, it's in your hand and you're looking at it, you might see something like this. But if you're drawing your fish underwater, these fish have a feature that you're not going to see on the real fish underwater. Do you know what it is? It's that highlight. See those highlights? Those highlights I've drawn on these fish, they make that fish look wet, right? Well, underwater, everything's wet. No highlight on this fish. There is no highlight on this fish. You get this fish out of water, oh look, highlights. So what we do is we have the fish down here and we go say to ourselves, well, this doesn't look slimy, it doesn't look wet. It just, it doesn't look, I want to make my fish look wet. And so I'm going to put all these highlights on it. And so we do that. Just be aware that when you're doing that, what you're drawing is a fish out of water. Some fish do have very shiny reflective scales. That's a different case, right? But highlights on fish, that is for a fish that is out of water. So if that is what you're intending to draw, great. If not, I mean, look at this person's hands even have highlights on reflection. Your hand right now, take a look at it, no highlights there. All right? So everything, wet things have highlights when you take them out of the water. You take that your same hand, you put your hand underwater, no more highlights on your wet hand. All right, and may I just put in my one last thing? This would be my pet peeve. My pet peeve, can you pick out what's wrong with this picture? Oh boy. Yep, did you say the bubbles? It's the bubbles. Okay, how do fish breathe? It's gills. They don't gulp air. All right, no. Okay, there are a few exceptions to this. Betas and things will make these sort of bubble nests, and they'll go up. Or fish that are in a tank that are are in non-oxygenated water. Some fish will kind of do a little air gulping thing, but generally fish don't go around blowing bubbles. And the oxygen from the water diffuses into their gills. Carbon dioxide from the body diffuses out of the gills. It's not creating bubbles. So we can just skip the bubbles on our fish. And what this comes from is that if you look at, say, a dolphin, if you look at a whale, or you look at a scuba diver, all of those are air-breathing mammals. So they'll go up to the surface, they'll get a gulp of air, and there will be bubbles coming out all around them, or even coming off the fur of an otter as it dives, or from duck feathers. But out of the mouth of a fish, we can do without our bubbles. And that, my friends, is the end. So I hope that this video has been of use to you. And what I need you to do now is, you've just sat through this entire workshop. The information is still fresh in your head. I would like you right now, go draw 3 fish. Go draw 3 fish. Draw 3 fish playing with the ideas of these parallel guides and planes on the body. Do it right now while this information is fresh in your head, and this information is going to stick. If you say, oh, next time I want to fish, I'll draw a fish, I'll just remember all this stuff, what your brain is going to have done by then is gone like, all that information, those parallel guides, all those tricks, that's really not essential for my survival. Your brain is going to do a select all, delete, dump on that data. But you do something with it now, that information will stick with you, and the next time you need to draw a fish, it'll still be with you. So go draw 3 fish right now, have fun, and get out there and sketch, fall in love with the world, and do what you can to save it in the end. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching.